Like, don't leave an asterisk beside your name for anything. It's like, oh, that guy's a good guy, or Born Primitive is great, but that's the asterisk, is that little but. Don't give that foothold to your competition of having that little asterisk beside your name. But going back, at that time, we didn't have much. I mean, I was living in a nowhere place, paying $400 a rent with a 15-year-old car, and we built University of Auburn's football that they won a couple natties off of. And, so we were still known as like, okay, these dudes know what they're talking about. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I say, like, success of product and success of impact on the community didn't necessarily correlate to success of bank account, but we were almost too dumb to care, because that's not what we were doing it for. We were doing it because we wanted to put really, really good equipment out and help people win. That was always the goal.
You're listening to the Born Primitive podcast.
Well, sweet. Well, Bert, welcome, man. Where are we coming in from?
South Carolina.
Nice.
Yeah, Columbia, South Carolina.
Well, appreciate you making the trip. And I know you're going to get on with Bruno on the Hot Wash podcast for Born Primitive Tactical after this. So we'll have dual episodes. So I think for today, I really want to focus on the entrepreneurial journey and starting with the origin story of Sorinex. Yes. Obviously, you guys have built an absolute powerhouse of a company. And, I think it's important. Like, I don't think people realize the statistical odds of what you guys have achieved, particularly any startup. We've thrown stats around before, but I think the latest stat is that 7% of startups actually succeed. And then when you start getting into revenue, like I was reading one, of that 7%, the people that actually get their business to over $1 million a year is like, that goes down to like, 0.5%. And then to get to 10 million.
The first million is really, really hard.
Yes. And, and then, you talk about, you get in 10, like, so you guys are an absolute unicorn. And I just like,
thank you.
Everyone sees like the, what you guys are now. But as I'm sure, hopefully we'll learn about, there was a time where you weren't that, and it was humble beginnings, and you're scrappy, and that, that's a lot. That's Born Primitive too. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, and so I'm super intrigued if you could give us the backstory for the origins of Sorinex. And as I understand, your father founded it, and then of course at some point I'm sure you got involved. So could you just get us started, where it all began and how it got to where we are now?
Yeah, I appreciate that. It's interesting, like you talk about the origin stories, and it's one thing if we had this idea, or Pops had this idea of like, hey, I'm going to make this business that, it's heavily involved. I wouldn't say taking over the industry, but like we're heavily relevant within the strength conditioning industry. And there was never a dollar amount. There was never an exposure amount. There was never really any type of business plan. So in some ways I kind of laugh when some of these guys, probably much like yourselves, like you actually know what you're doing, seems like. But we didn't. We had no idea. So if you back it up, we started in 1980. So you got to think like that's coming off of the 70s. Pops was he was an athlete in college. He was a South Carolina thrower, a weightlifter, competed at the nationals in weightlifting, was starting to do some powerlifting. And so he like always lived by the barbell. The barbell was the standard. And that was like, he told me, he's like, the barbell was the one thing in my life that I could trust, that never backed off. I knew what I got from it. And he said from I was 5 years old till the day he died at 74, he lifted weights. And so he's like, that was the one thing. Women came and went, but his business partners came and went. And he's like, but I always knew whatever I put into the barbell, I would get out of. So he was a thrower. He's the highest rated thrower, discus thrower in the nation in high school. So he was recruited, but he wasn't intending to go to college. He was going to get into the machining world. He liked building stuff. No one in our family had ever been to college. So it wasn't a forethought really. He said, he goes, I was good at throwing, but I loved lifting, but I didn't realize that my love for lifting made me a great thrower. So it was kind of this weird correlation. So anyway, he gets recruited, goes to the University of South Carolina. As he was there, he got there in 1968. He said, hey, where's the weight room? They said, weights will make you muscle bound. We don't want to do that. And he's like, no. But he was like the high recruit. So they let him borrow a car and drive back to New Jersey and pick his own weights up and bring him back to South Carolina. And then as a freshman, they gave him a room in the Russell House, which is like the big general all student center at South Carolina. And they said, we'll give you this room in the basement. And you could, if you want to build the equipment, we'll give you a budget to build. Could you imagine this? A freshman in college, they're giving him money to go to the hardware store and get wood and build weightlifting, because they're like, you're our star, our prize bull. Like, you're going to get what you want. And so he brought all this York barbells and stuff back down. And so he started weightlifting, was the first athlete at South Carolina to lift weights. And he was stronger than all the football players. And so they used to get in the hallway. And sorry, the origin story, of course, starts before 1980. This is part of it. So in the Roost, which was the athletic dorm, they had these hallways. I can't remember, they're about 6 or 8 feet wide. Well, the guys, Pops would start, they put back to back and then their feet against the walls, and they would do leg press competitions. And so whoever squashes the other guy wins. It was kind of like an arm wrestling, but it was big. And he could beat any athlete at South Carolina, almost every athlete with one leg. And then so the other athletes started going, why is Richard so strong? And he's like, well, because I lift weights every day. And so the other football players started lifting weights with him. And so he was such a visionary from that side. At that point, there weren't really strength conditioning in college. So he did that. He was lifting. And then when he graduated, he came on as a GA in his master's program to write the curriculum for weightlifting. Actually, he was a physical education major. So he ended up writing the curriculum for weightlifting for all of South Carolina high schools and middle schools, and the gymnastics curriculum. And so if you've ever seen that old video with Stan Laprati, I believe it was LaSalle High School, La Sierra High School, the one you see all the kids like on the dip bars, and it's a very famous.
Yes.
So that guy left La Sierra High School and came to South Carolina and was Pops's professor. So that was one of his mentors. And so he was coming from a background of weights, and then he comes to South Carolina and that guy's his professor. So it was like, oh, this is just what you do. So he pushed. And so that kind of changed the industry, changed the scholastic side of it. But then he started Sorin. He was a PE teacher, and then started Sorin Playgrounds. And so we built playgrounds for the different schools in the district. And he was just trying to make money, but he was also lifting weights every evening. That's just what he loved to do. And one day someone said, hey, would you build us a bench? It was like a local church. And he's like, yeah, sure. And so then his next door neighbor taught him how to weld and said, hey, come over. I taught him how to weld. So Pops sold a bench, took half the money, went down to Mantool and Electric, bought a porta bandsaw, built another thing, took half the money, went down to Mantool, bought a second thing. And he would go over to his neighbor. He goes, okay, I have another $100. What do I need to get? He goes, go get a mag drill. He goes, okay. He went down there and he would teach him how to use it. And so in the carport, he just learned how to build stuff, but he was a big, strong guy. So he started making things that weren't in the industry because he was 6'5" and he was strong. And he said, well, all this equipment's built for normal sized people, and athletes aren't normal sized people. They're stronger, they're bigger, they'll tear stuff up. It needs to be more adjustable. You need to have more safety. So he was always had a lot of ingenuity, even as a kid. So he just learn, hey, I could kind of make this thing into a business. Wasn't really thought to, it was like, hey, maybe a couple $1,000s a year. And so he was running Sorin Playgrounds, Sorin Equipment, and being a teacher. And then he and my mom were divorced by then, but a girl he was dating at the time, she said, Richard, this is killing you running 3 jobs. Like you got to stop at least one of them or I'm leaving you. And then he was like, well, get out of here. Cause he was like a egotistical type A dude. And so he laughed later. He's like, oh, she was totally right. I should have stopped. But of course, finally he retired from teaching, and we had Sorin Playground, Sorin Equipment. And then it just, the legality and all the stuff it's just there's a lot of exposure when you're building for kids. And so it was like, hey, that's a lot of ass out in the wind scenario that we weren't really prepared for. So we shifted fire to the real true love, which was Sorin Playgrounds. That was officially at about 82 or 83. We kind of went all in Sorin Sorin Equipment. But that was the origin story was 1980, where we started in the carport, not even a garage. It was like carport's just like a lean-to. And so that's how it like really started. So to kind of understand, it was a guy that always loved lifting, and just as a kid, he was an only child. So both of his parents worked. So they left him in his house, and they said, don't leave the yard. So he wasn't allowed to have friends and go out and whatever. So a barbell, and he built a platform in his backyard, and he lifted weights, and then he would just have to make stuff. He was like, I want to do a standing press. Well, then he would build something off of his stairs that allowed him to do a single arm standing press. So the ingenuity kept going because he just had to. It was necessity.
Where did that initial where did his interest? It sounds like that's one of the variables, the fact that he couldn't leave the yard. But what were the other sparks for him to even be interested and know that was a thing that he could do?
His first movie he ever saw with his parents was Hercules Unchained.
Gotcha. Yep.
He saw Hercules Unchained, African Queen, and Moby Dick. And I laugh and go, oh my gosh, those 3 movies you could totally see imprinted his entire life. 100%.
Yeah.
And like, I mean, hunting, fishing, the outdoors, big adventure, and being strong. That was his blueprint. And you look at that, you're like, wow, that was all imprinted at 6 years old.
And I'm trying to go back in time. I wasn't alive yet, but what was the strength and conditioning industry looking like as far as equipment? You mentioned York.
Yeah.
Were there companies
barbells.
making? Okay, but were there like flat benches and incline benches and all these things yet?
Yeah, there were, but they were like really chintzy.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think late 70s, early 80s, that was the advent of Nautilus. So that was when Nautilus and machines and the Nautilus cam, and that was like the bodybuilding was really ramping up. Think of like, go watch Pumping Iron. That's that same era.
Yeah, and
so
even just like if you think of the bench presses in those videos, they're really narrow.
And they don't adjust.
They're flimsy. You know,
power racks weren't really a thing. If they were for isometrics. Olympic lifting wasn't really a big thing at all.
In that type of stuff, it sounds like, you know, that was more specific to the bodybuilding crowd, because it sounds like from what you said, it wasn't implemented into sport yet.
It wasn't,
which is crazy. And then you think of like how it immediately evolved. I'm thinking of like Nebraska
when he said it,
where it was like game on, you know, but to know that at 1980, you know, they didn't even have a weight room for a Division I program.
So that'd been 1968. They didn't, but strangely enough, right around 68 to 70, there was a young athlete who was also a track and field athlete. He was a pole vaulter at the University of Nebraska named Boyd Epley. And Boyd Epley is known now to be as the father of the college strength coach. He was allegedly the first strength coach. That's what many believe. Okay. So they're roughly the same age, same nest of background, because track and field is the sport of training. That's what it is. It's that all a track meet is how good did my training go? It's not strategy. It's not all this other. It's big, higher, faster, stronger, period. Did my training work? So that's where really the most of human performance training for athletes came from the track and field nest. And if it was explosive based, it almost always came from the throwers, because they were the biggest, strongest guys. So it just kind of worked out. And so you had, by 80, the powerlifting was starting to ramp up. Bodybuilding was still hitting hard, but sports athletic strength conditioning training looked a lot more like kind of gym bro. Guys were going to bench, squat, deadlift. Some were going to clean, and they're going to do a shit ton of hypertrophy stuff just to get really big. And in all honesty, there was a lot of drugs. You know, that was prior to steroids really being illegal in the country. And that's, you know, you remember down the mid 80s, there was the big steroid scandals and all the college schools. And it was,
you remember wild. Guys like Bosworth, he was Oklahoma. Dude. It was that mid 80s.
That was late 80s.
Obviously those guys were on some serious
gear.
You
see some track stuff from back in the day. Bro. There's been videos where, because my wife was a Division I track athlete.
Yeah, sure.
And I'm like, that's a guy. And then you get to the end of the video and it's like, no, that was that's the world record holder in the women's 800. And you're like, literally looks, they're built absolutely shredded. And some of those got they did pull back some of those, but then there's some where you're like, yeah, you probably shouldn't have a world record. Not that you weren't a very, very high level athlete, but you were juiced to the gills.
Let's be really honest, that most of the records from the mid 80s are, they're wind dated.
Oh yeah.
You know, I mean, they just are, because that was what the sport was. It was, you know, who could take the most. And then later it was made it illegal. Then it was who could take the most, the closest to competition and get away with it.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was who could get away with it. And then, you know, in the mid 90s, that was when I came on. So there was still a belief that no one would throw the world record in the shot put without drugs. Like we all kind of like, yeah, but it ain't really going to happen. Like everyone's like, those are all the East Germans. Those are like, that was how that was. And so I came up in the system, what we're going to do as good as we can. Like, we can't take drugs. They're testing. This is how this is. We're going to do as good as we can in the kiddie pool end, because those dudes were all gas and, hey, great. That was what they did. And whether you want to judge it or whatever, that was how that was. And then it wasn't until very, very recently did the performances start going past what the drug era was. And my theory is it took 30 to 40 years of athletes kind of breeding that out of them, that they thought the drugs were the method to get there, but then also truly learning technique, learning velocity. Like we didn't have the dart fishes and all the things of video capturing. You just kind of watched 8mm. We used to watch VHS once a month. Oh, this is what I'm doing. I'll try to write down notes and do this in practice. Well, now everyone's seeing joint angles and velocity, attack speeds. And so the technology, I believe, has fully helped actually have a golden era now.
Yeah.
And so it's been very, very interesting because it was something that we didn't believe was possible to actually eclipse some of those drug era. But the guys were so strong. You know, there's Udo Bayer, an 880 for 3 or 4 back squat raw, you know, but he's a 70-foot stand thrower in the shot. You're like, okay, 69.6 won the Athens Olympics. This guy was able to stand throw that. It's like, oh, but he also had a 600-pound behind the neck jerk.
Yeah.
They're just totally different era. So that was kind of that era I grew up in, but that's what that looked like in that early 80s. And so Pops, you know, kind of going back to it, he saw that he was a barbell guy and he just knew how to build stuff, or it was really more of an art at the time. He liked doing it. It was like if you teach someone how to build a knife, you ever notice how like knife makers, they make a gazillion knives in their first few years because they're so pumped. They just want to do it. It's like an expression. And I think that's literally what it was. It wasn't a business model. It was this thing opened his mind. I've always loved strength training, and now I know how to build this stuff for real, and I have all the tools. So I'm just going to explore and do this fun stuff. And then if local people want it, I'll just keep working my craft. And that was the first 4 or 5 years was just local stuff. And we weren't really, I mean, Pops was maybe making 15 or 20 grand a year, maybe.
And what was the big, what was there a catalyzing moment where you're like, oh, this shifted to a real
that
gig?
Was University of Kentucky. I want to say 86, 87.
So was that his first, like,
that was his first hammer of giant room.
Okay. Where he like landed like a strength and conditioning facility contract or something like that.
Yeah. We had some like smaller rooms,
okay,
but the big one was University of Kentucky, you know, SEC school, had a high level human performance coach there. And he wanted just everything custom. And like where most people were like, hey, I'll take 5 racks. He wanted everything was to the nth degree and stuff that didn't exist. And so that put a very dynamic thinking, inventive, ingenuitive guy that could build whatever because he had no SKUs, you know? Mm-hmm. So he's like, sure, I'll paint you this crazy custom room. And it was what we would kind of consider one of the first super rooms. That wasn't just a few racks here and there. It was, you know, everything matched, everything, you know, perfect color matches. The benches would adjust. I mean, we used to have like each piece would come through and benches will be 48 inches wide. They will adjust from 37 inches to 51.5 inches. And we would have the coaches sign off on each thing. Like everything was made to spec, probably much like, you know, in the teams where you guys have specs on weapons and tools and things like that. It was very similar to that, but that wasn't a thing prior to that. And so we weren't supposed to get that job. It was the coach already had someone that he had kind of chosen, but Pops fought his ass off to win the job, but then he had to sell his house to fund it. So we didn't have any steel. We didn't have the money for the amount of steel, and his partner at the time crawfished on him and split off and made a competing business after they won the room. So we right before that, so we wouldn't win the room. I mean, it's a wild ass story, like hitman, like all kinds of craziness, and broke off from him on his birthday. His best friend took all of his employees, called him and said, hey, I'm sorry, this is only business, but I have your guys. We're starting up our own thing. We don't need you. And good luck and everything. He's like, no, you're talking about my livelihood. And they're like, sorry, it's only business. So then they started a competing brand with, you know, his guys who had his designs and things like that. And so Pops could have decided to melt away into obscurity or to fight. And so he fought. And so it's a kind of a crazy story. So the guy who kind of backed off, you know, pulled out, he was a money guy and knew that Pops had no money. And so they had a building together that they had bought together was Sorin equipment. And he gave him a buy sell option. He's like, okay, you name the price. Or I think it was like, he's like, I'll name the price, the rich guy, and said, and then you have the choice to either sell it to me for that price or buy it from me from that price, which is, if you know the other guy doesn't have any money, of course you just put a really low price and you get it for a song because he doesn't have shit anyway. Guy put a price knowing that Pops had like $14 to his name. Well, Pops had already visited one of his buddies and made a deal that he would buy the building and then the next day sell it to him for a profit. And he'd already worked that. So when the guy put this number out, he goes, cool, I'll buy it. And the guy was like, what? So he bought back his own building, stayed in business, sold it to his friend. The profit he was able to put towards pulling back and getting infrastructure, and then sold his house on the back end of it to pay for the steel, and then rented his own house back from the guy. And then that's so like when people say like, oh, I'm all in on my business, I'm like, but are you really? Like, would you sell your house and then extend yourself to the point of near death? And like, that's like what it took the first time.
I love that. And it's such a good point, because not only did your dad sell his house to he was fighting to keep the business going and to land that contract with the University of Kentucky. But what's also critical to point out, because I can relate to this, as you mentioned, it had been 4 to 5 years, I believe, by that point, right?
Yeah.
And he wasn't making a killing. I'm sure he's putting a little bit of food on the table, but he was by no means living lavishly, right?
We weren't throwing fish back, put it that way.
He was barely getting by. And that's for the entrepreneurs out there, or the aspiring entrepreneurs, that's something that you have to be ready to accept, because, for our business, I didn't take a paycheck for 6 years. Mal, I think, took it at 5.5. And I was active duty at the time. So we were just living on one salary because you had to put it back into the business. Most people would not be willing to do something for 5 or 6 years without actually taking a penny from it. Particularly when it dominates your life, because I'm sure he was working like a maniac.
Oh.
You have to figure everything out on your own, from the accounting to, obviously the equipment running. I mean, you don't know anything. You just figure it out.
And you bring on a partner that you think is going to take care of that. And then once he sees that he or she sees that this part is great, but I could pull this part away and just go do this on my own now that I know the secret sauce. Well, then that kind of changes the game as well. And that's what happens. So you're exactly right. And I tell people, like, owning your own business or doing anything, and I'm going to train for this. I want to see how fun it is when it's not fun at all anymore. Exactly. When, during that time, Pops had nothing. And one of his roommates in college was living with him at his house. And for the University of Kentucky job, he was building all the upholstery in Pops's garage and literally just living at the house for free and building the upholstery. And a kid down the street who Pops had taught in PE, I think worked at Kentucky Fried Chicken or something like that. And would just every night when the food was, the stuff they're going to throw away, he would just bring bags and hang it on Pops's doorknob. And that was like his dinner. And so Pops was like, yeah, some nights I'd get dinner, some nights I wouldn't. And they lived near a creek. It was totally illegal. He would jump over the fence into Allied Chemical and sneak in there, and they would catch stripers all night out of the lake. Out of the river, and they bring them back and clean it. Like, that's what they had to eat. And there's like, hey man, this was how this is, like it or not, this is what we had to do. Most people probably wouldn't do it. And hopefully most people wouldn't have to, but that was, those were really, really hard years. And then when, it's kind of crazy, like when he won or right before the bid opening, the other company actually sent someone out there to like beat him up straight, like actually like real old time, just beat his ass so he wouldn't show up at the it was like a pretty bad dude in the area. It was like a martial arts guy. And so they were out, Pops and he's called him Uncle Bobby. That's the one that did all the upholstery. They were out, having some drinks one night, kind of blowing off some steam, and this cat walked in there and started to fight. Uncle Bobby's beat his ass, but he beat Uncle Bobby's ass, which is very rare to happen. And so Pops just grabbed the dude by the throat, just choked the shit out of him. And then the cops knew Dad because he was friends with him, and then also knew his grip. And they're like, Richard, you can let him go. Like, you're going to kill him if you don't keep going. But he realized, like, oh shit, like they're actually coming after my livelihood with this. Wow. Which again, it sounds very fanciful, but you're like, oh, this is the stuff that used to play, right?
Yeah,
Like this was kind of the mid 80s. Like this was, this was potentially a thing. So fast forward, we get the job, had to burn we had no reserves, but we burned everything to get the job, and got it, and did a really good job on it. And even to the point where the coach who got it he's like, I have to admit, he's like, this is the nicest room I've ever seen. So that was the first like stamp, like, yes, we can do this. Screw the people who don't believe we could do it. And then about 2 or 3 years later, Bruno Pauletto called him, and Bruno was the strength conditioning coach at Tennessee, and called Pops and said, hey, I want a weight room. I want the best weight room in the world. And he said, I want it better than Kentucky because they're big rivals. Pop's like, that's the best room in the world. And he goes, well, it needs to be better. So that was like chapter 2 started. And then it was like, oh, people actually will call for this, but you have to do everything better than what's available. You have to burn all the gas. You have to put everything into it. This is no half measure. And then that kind of started creating the culture of like how we designed rooms.
Yeah. Just out of curiosity, is to finance something like that, do they put a decent deposit down, or is it like, hey, make this for us, and when you deliver it,
sometimes,
we'll pay you?
Generally now we all take a deposit because it's custom, right? But in those early years when you didn't have a name, now we're like, hey, this is our policy deposit. Military, not so much, but the colleges, they all know how this works. Back then, they're like, well, we don't know you. You're just some dude in South Carolina. You're going to take our $100,000 and bounce, and so sometimes you had friends kick in money to help fund it. Sometimes you had to sell your house. It was wild, man.
Well, I would imagine that the strength and conditioning community is probably pretty tight knit. Like the strength coaches probably all knew each other, especially early on when there weren't
because there were so few of them.
So you land one, and then Tennessee coach is saying, well, shit, that looks pretty damn good.
It looks pretty damn exactly.
And then obviously they're getting these Division I programs are getting big money for the football program. So so I could totally see the domino effect from that one account that you guys landed.
And you have to do it right, because if you don't do it right, everyone hears about it.
Yep.
And we had another one, University of Texas. I think like a bench pad the coach called us, Rock Gullickson, and called us, said, hey, the bench pad is, a half inch off. And Pops flew to Texas and showed up the next day, and he's like, where the heck did you come from? He's like, you said something was off. I'm here. And the guy was like, what? Like, this is how you do this? And he's like, yeah, like I respect you, and we got to fix this. And so, but that customer, that's, let's say in 91, 92. Well, then you look at all of his assistants that were there during that time. Well, those are still all of our customers 30 years later, because they were there as young at seeing Richard Sorin walk in the thing. It's like, no, I'm going to make this right, however that is. And Rock is still in the industry and still a customer. He's, and they were like, no, your dad always did what he said he was going to do, and looked me in the eye and walked right in here, shook my hand, and made everything right.
At what point did he realize, okay, like I have to scale my operation and have like a more of a professional kind of production?
20 years later.
Okay.
I mean,
really? So what did it look like?
When did you get involved too?
I got involved in 1999. So that's when I came.
So where were you in your life at this point?
Okay. So I was a kid, and I was just a 10-year-old kid that was, my mom and dad were divorced. I lived with my mom. So I'd go to my dad's every other weekend on Wednesdays. And so my memory was, dad's always stressed. I would hear parts and pieces about different jobs that we were attempting to get, or, Garth Brooks would buy a home gym from us or something cool like that. Like, oh, that's badass,
Yeah.
Like, you get like front row tickets to Garth when he's like hot. You're like, this is badass.
Front row tickets for a squat rack.
It was super cool, right? And so stuff like that was like high water marks. Like, this is awesome, but it was never like a world brand. It was a local brand that we did neat stuff outside in the world at times. And I got there in 99, and my all I wanted to do was reduce stress. My job was, how do I help Pops? He was 49 at the time. I was 22. And it's like, okay, how do I just help him? How do I make sure that he's not stressed? I love strength and conditioning because I'm just getting out of college, where I was a thrower and lifting all the time. And I was picking over every rock, trying to find out how to get on an Olympic team. So I was learning the human performance world. And I was like, well, gosh, I love this. So I'm going to get into this. But my goal was never to take over the world by any stretch of imagination. It was, how do I help him? So came on the first day. I was like, hey, what do you need me to do? And I'd already worked in the shop, when all my friends had jobs at the pool and the in the mall and stuff like that. I was chipping BBs and cutting steel and drilling steel to all the dirty work. So I'd been through all that. Then I did installs through, all college. And so I'd kind of done all the different processes, and then showed up with, hired me July 1, 1999. My salary was $26,000 a year.
How many employees were at the company at that time?
Well, at that time it was Pops and I, and we had a group out of Illinois who we had contracted our manufacturing, and there was 7 or 8 of them. So it was very, very small. And so it was just, it was not thrive. It was, let's just not die.
And at this time, was your dad actually making money? Like he was actually able to kind of like have a living?
Consider money?
Okay, so not so much.
He's living in a 1-bedroom. He was sharing a house with 4 other dudes, living in a 1-bed. He had 1 bedroom that was his.
Okay,
and they had it worked out where they could the TV room, like the big room, they would have alternating nights. Like that was.
And this is 99.
Yeah, so you've been at 19
then
years.
When did it technically start?
80.
Okay, so that's important for everyone to listen.
19 years.
That is what it takes, and we're not even to success yet.
No,
financial success.
Right,
Yeah.
And so there had been in a time there had been partners backing out on him twice and taking all the money out. One time created bankruptcy, so he had to start. That's why he was living in a house, starting over. He sold his car, sold everything, got back into it. So then that's when we started getting a manufacturer to start our deal back. A couple strength coaches said, hey, one of them being Ed Ellis, who was a legendary coach. It was at Wake Forest. Said, and Pops was getting back on his feet. Hey, I still know how to build equipment. I'm going to get these other folks to build it to my specs. And he said, I believe you. And Pops told him, he's like, if you allow me to do this work for you, he's like, you'll have a friend for life. And, and literally to the day he died, he held Ed in super high, super high honor. And then, but the Ed Ellis, that's kind of interesting. The Ed Ellis's main assistant was Coach Scott Sinclair, who is now at University of Georgia football. So we've been working with him and then that family of coaches since the mid 90s. And so that's where people, they don't understand how far some of these relationships go back. And that's where I always tell them, no matter what business you're in, it's all about relationships. It's all about doing what you say you're going to do at whatever cost. And because you could screw up we call it no asterisks. Like, don't leave an asterisk beside your name for anything. It's like, oh, that guy's a good guy, or Born Primitive is great, but that's the asterisk, is that little but. Don't give that foothold to your competition of having that little asterisk beside your name. And so, those just always building in and giving back to those coaches and helping those younger ones develop. That's what kind of made it. So, but going back at that time, we didn't have much. Pops, I was living in a nowhere place, paying $400 a rent with a 15-year-old car. Pops was making probably 38, 40 grand a year at that point. I was making 26. And we built the University of Auburn's football that they won a couple natties off of. And, so we were still known as like, okay, these dudes know what they're talking about. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I say, like, success of product and success of impact on the community didn't necessarily correlate to success of bank account. But we were almost too dumb to care, because that's not what we were doing it for. We were doing it because we wanted to put really, really good equipment out and help people win. That was always the goal.
And I wonder, just from to get into kind of a little bit more on the business side, were you guys just not charging enough? Were your gross margins just terrible by the time you paid for steel and your labor to make it?
Possibly. Yeah. We didn't have enough things vertically integrated within our system. Pops had no business courses. I had no business courses. We were two athletes that loved training, right?
Yeah.
We farmed out too many parts of the process to other people, trusted too many other people that weren't fully bought in. And we just, we knew what we knew and we didn't know what we didn't know. And I was there, I was there maybe 7 or 8 years. And I think, I wouldn't say Pops didn't have the vision any further than that, but he told me one time, he said, Bert, this was never meant to be like a big business. Mm-hmm. He goes, all I wanted was to be relevant within the community of people that I cared about. He goes, and that's the strength world. And then he goes, if I could if I could bring something to the table that changes the strength world positively, that's all I was looking for. I was never wanting to be a millionaire. I was never wanting to have my name on a statue. Like he goes, I just wanted, if I walked into a room, they go, that guy builds really great equipment and I trust him. That was the goal.
Yeah.
So in a way, like if that's the goal and you achieve that, then all you do is fight to continue that goal. And it was just probably about 2007, 2008, maybe 9, somewhere right around there. I'd been there 10 years ish. And we had 7 employees on the Sorinex side. I'd hired a couple people. I think I was still in my 30s, I guess I was. And we were worn out. Like all my guys of staff were just worn. And like we were just, you're running hot, but now you're starting to build some bigger rooms. Our revenue had climbed, but we still felt like we just hadn't made the impact on the industry that we'd really wanted to. And I pulled everybody together on a Friday afternoon. It was 7 of us, all 7 of us. And we're in the back of this little shitty warehouse. We were in a strip mall. So our gym was about 2,500 square feet, which was our gym and showroom and lab. Our Pops' and my office. Down beside Carolina Wings was another building in the strip mall that we rented. And it was like a little quick ship area. So we would ship little products and build some things. And my folks were working back there. And I walked back there and I was like, all right, guys, like we're all frustrated that we're not getting the market share that we feel that our product and our service really can add to the community. We're not winning how we think we should be winning. And I said, okay, we're still in our 30s. Some of you are in your 20s. I said, let's hammer this thing for the next 3 years. If we hammer it unrelentlessly, I mean, we're talking like minimal vacations, almost never going home on time, like really, really hammering it. I said, I think in 3 years, we could be on track to where we think Sorinex could really be. But if not, we're going to run the son of a bitch into the ground in 2. I was like, but at least we'll know. We'll know one way or the other. And if it's great and it's what we think it'll be, we'll be on our track to where we want to be. And if not, we'll all still be young enough to go get real jobs. I was like, but I don't want to wait till I'm 40 to find this out. And so everyone's like, all right. I said, don't answer now. If you're here on Monday, I assume you're on the ship. And that means the next 3 years, no one's effing going anywhere. Like we're going to just burn it at all levels. And this is it. No harm if you don't show up. I totally get it. I'm asking you to sign on and burn the ships, but like, well, at least we'll know. And then we could all say we did something, or we could keep effing around. Kinda. All 7 people showed up. We're like, all right, fuck it. And then it's like, we called it Operation Sternum Stomp. We're like, we're going to sternum stomp the shit out of everybody. And it was braggadocious, and it's probably in your athletic and warrior career, sometimes you just have to get yourself ahead of steam and just believe that like you could stomp through anything. And that was just the mindset, was like, no, we're going to put out the best equipment absolutely possible, service it better than anybody. We're going to change the industry from the inside to what we think it should be. And we're just going to do it to our best of our ability. And if it doesn't work, then we'll know, and we'll go be trainers or something.
And let's fast forward to that 3-year mark, or even the 2-year mark. Was it obvious? Holy shit, guys.
It was obvious, but it's still super slow compared, right? Like, you go up a little bit and you land some other big jobs, you do some great stuff, and you kind of decide like, hey, maybe we should market. Like maybe we should get on social media. Maybe we should but we weren't doing any of that. It was all word of mouth. And prior to that, but it was like, okay, well, let's stop playing the game how everyone else in the industry is doing it. And that was the start of that. Was initially it was, okay, we're going to go to all the same conferences that everyone does. We're going to get all the same booth space. We're going to like do all the same style of marketing. We're all the same stuff. And we're just trying to toe to toe fight some of these giants in the industry. And I mean, as warriors, you like asymmetric warfare. And that's kind of probably around the time I started working with the asymmetric warfare world. And I was paying attention. And I was like, hey, hold on a second. How do we change the battlefield from the inside while we're on the battlefield? And it's kind of, maybe I should say it or not, but like, Francis Marion is the Swamp Fox. So he was the from South Carolina, he's who the Patriot was written off of. So
gotcha.
He would strike, but he lived in the swamp, now the Francis Marion National Forest, and he would strike and cause major damage and then retreat back into the swamp because the British couldn't follow him into the swamp, but he could live in the swamp. And so that's how I started viewing it. I was like, okay, we're going to start changing the game to how we could do that, where our strengths are. And so that was just assessing our strengths and kind of building the asymmetric warfare model. And it just, but it slowly kind of creeps, right? And so that was, it was kind of cool because that was when I was being more inducted into this community. And so a lot of more of my friends were from the warrior culture, and we would sit up at night and have bourbons and talk and I'm trying to understand their mindset. And we realized our mindset was very, very similar, but we would just share strategy and share how we're viewing things. And so again, my goal was always to be very valuable to this community. I did not serve our country in that way. So my goal is to hopefully I could serve through resources and support or whatever I could do with that community. And then, in the reverse, I was getting a lot of, not sensitive information, but information of mindset and strategy. And so I took it as a very personal, like, we're going to change the conditions of the battlefield.
And as you look back, was there ever a moment, I know you used kind of University of Kentucky for your dad, but where you were sitting there in the seat like, all right, this is fucking legit now, and we've kind of made it?
Yeah, I would say two rooms. One of them was 2000, I'll get it wrong, 10 or 12, maybe 12-ish. University of Auburn the second time. There's a monster room, and Auburn was popping, right? They were the dogs. And same coach we worked with in 1999 was still there, Kevin Yoxel. And he wanted a rack with a functional column and a lat pull low row and all this other stuff that it could do. And then nothing in the industry had that. And almost every other company's like, they didn't want to dig, right? They're like, it's not really a doable thing. And so no one really thought that it was doable at that scale to have a rack that could do all this stuff. And we had just launched the base camp rack, which was the first rack with holes in all four sides, which created the whole rack rig genre. Like, that was the whole, I drew that up on a bar napkin one day. That was 2007 going into the 2008 CrossFit Games. I brought it there to the ranch. But a couple years later, the base camp rack, that created safety straps, that created every accessory that goes onto a rack. Like, that was that advent of it, but it had not been like widely accepted by the strength conditioning community yet. It was just too different looking. It had holes everywhere. There's shit everywhere on it. People were like, oh, that's so busy. And so I'd taken a year or two and just really fine-tuned all the things it could do, and basically wrote up pros and cons. Like, here's your current weight room and everyone in the industry's current weight room. Here's their strengths. Here's basically a SWOT analysis of it. And I would prove to the coaches on paper, like, no, this is a better way to do this. It's kind of like the Picatinny rail versus, specific holes for scopes. And it's like, you could say all you want until you realize if you have a standardized system that you could do anything with, inventions and all this other application will come from it if we could standardize certain things. And so really the rack system that we designed was the first standardization of that. And you see the entire industry now is doing it. But going back to Auburn, I remember Pops was doing something else. I can't remember. He was doing another install. And so my guys and we went down and installed Auburn, and it was unbelievable. It was 24 racks with 24 lat pulls, 24 cable columns, 10 sets of dumbbells up to 150s or 200s.
Wow.
It was
10
crazy.
sets.
10 sets.
Crap.
It was bonkers. 8 of this, 8 of that.
Yeah.
It was just this.
Oh.
And the room was crazy. It was like so customized. Everything had a laser cut logo on it. This rack was orange with blue up accessories. The next one was blue with orange, and it went back and forth and alternating logos. It was so much to keep up with. And I was like pretty proud of it. And then Pops drove down to Auburn, and he walked through the room, and he's the king, right? He's the guy that started it. But as I grew, just like a young bull and old bull, there's always that competitiveness. We each wanted our rooms to be better than the other guys because we loved it, but it was like, all right, I'm going to come up with something cooler. And it was like such a awesome moment for me as a son. He's an only child. I'm an only child, and you have 2 alpha bulls. He walked through for about 10 minutes. And he looked at me, he goes, I couldn't have done this. He goes, this is the best weight room in the world. He goes, I couldn't have made this. And I'm like, holy shit. Like, did we just pass the torch? Like, and he was just like, tears in his eyes, like, good job. I'm like, all right. So I was driving home that Sunday from that job. We'd done it like Thursday, Friday, Saturday install, driving home Sunday. And my friend, Craig Fitzgerald, was at Penn State, and they just had their big scandal. And so the place is gutted. Like, morale is at all-time low. Everything is crazy. And he calls me, he goes, what you doing? I was like, I'm leaving Auburn right now. He goes, how'd it turn out? And I said, it's the best room in the world. He goes, I need you up here Tuesday. He goes, send me pictures. And so I sent him pictures from my phone, literally as I'm driving, 8 pictures of the room. And I showed up Tuesday. He picks me up at the airport. I walk in. Not only was it him, his whole staff, the president of Penn State, the athletic director, and the head coach were all standing in his office, and they had the pictures of Auburn printed out. They're like, it has to be better than Auburn. So I'm thinking like, holy shit, this is exactly what Pops heard from Tennessee and Kentucky. And I'm like, but instead of this job being 3 years old, this was 3 days old. I go, I can't do any better than that. Like that's just,
what are you going to innovate?
What am I going to innovate? I drove here, right? And he's like, no, but seriously, he goes, you know, there's something about that room you would do differently. And I was like, actually, I would have done this. And we sat there on his computer, and I designed the entire weight room with all of those men standing behind me in real time. Did it right in front of them, quoted it to them, and they gave me a deposit check 2 days later. And that was then that, in my opinion, it wasn't me, but that surge is what saved Penn State's athletic department. Because when they got rid of all the other stuff, and it was more theatrics a little bit of, this is out with the old, in with the new. Every single plate said, we are Penn State. It's like, let's pull back together. We didn't have anything to do with that nonsense. Hold your head high. You are Penn State. So they built that new room, and they saved a lot of their people that were getting picked to go other. I mean, they were getting stripped, right? Remember, there was the death penalty with NCAA. And so that saved them having all their athletes stripped out of there. And then the next year they did 3 other rooms on campus that all matched. And so it was the solidarity of like, we are all in this together. And then you saw like that, not only the football program, the school, and the whole town started to come back up. And so for me, like, the Auburn that went into the Penn State not only changed how weight rooms were technically done, but just the impact that had, like, on a community. Like, to me, that was like, okay, that was my Kentucky moment.
Yeah. And you don't have to disclose if you don't want, but just for fun, like, what does a weight room, like when Penn State did it, like, what's the budget on something like that?
It was $829,000.
Nice. Okay. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And how quickly could you turn that around? Like, when you drove back to South Carolina, like, what'd they say? Hey, can you be here in 5 weeks?
I can't remember, honestly, the length of time. I remember Fitz hit me about every 10 seconds. So I was like, where it is, we got to go. We got to go. And Fitz is a pusher. Like, he is an absolute amazing sports psychologist and salesman. Like, he will sell everybody on the thing. And that was what was really cool, that situation, because he was a strength coach, but he was walking into a really, really bad situation. And everyone was afraid to grab the wheel. Like, everyone's afraid to drive at Penn State during that time because they're like, we're not supposed to be here. And he stepped up. He's like, no, pull your heads up. We're going to do this. And he just started making these wild changes. But it was exactly who they needed at that point to, like, galvanize and ramp everybody up and pull them together. And so, like, I'm very, very proud that I got to build the room at that point that was like the new era of Penn State football. And then, we just did the room again about 3 years ago, the upfit, and they keep surging and going up. But it was neat to kind of be there at ground zero of like, okay, this place is smoldering ashes, and people just, I'm sitting in Fitz's office, and literally assistants are walking in his office, go, hey, so-and-so just left, like their star quarterback, Southern Cal just got our so-and-so, Arizona State just got our so-and-so. And you're just watching, like, you're watching the ship fall apart at real time. And he's like, hold on. And he'll, like, walk out and talk to an athlete and, like, convince them to stay at Penn State in the weight room while I'm sitting there in his office. I'm like, holy crap, this is wild. So, like, to be privy to that stuff and to know, like, if we do a really, really, really good job on this room, we give them a chance. We help give them a chance. Like that's where it's so much more than racks. It's so much more than SKU numbers. And that's where maybe like always the business side of like the true business part of it, I've been less on because I care so much about the other stuff.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question is where did you find, and it sounds like you just answered it at least to a degree, is as you guys got bigger and you established yourself, did you find yourself wanting to stay on kind of the product innovation side?
Yeah,
and how did you build out the team to help support the operation?
It's a great question. And that was where I would say that 2000, oh geez, it's hard to remember times. 14, 15, we brought on an older gentleman who had nothing to do with the strength conditioning world. He was an absolute beast. I mean, the dude had done everything in life, construction, built cell towers, done cybersecurity. He just like a jack of all trades, and he's just hyper aggressive, wanting to get after it. And we brought him on, and it was really hard because you're dealing with a guy that's totally different than you. But I called him my no man, meaning his job was to say no to me, although he worked for me. And because he was older and he was abrasive and everything like that. But I wanted that because sometimes as the top guy, you get surrounded by yes men. They'll just, and if you don't have a strength in certain areas, you could steer yourself into the wrong spot. But you have a guy with some gray on the top that just doesn't care about impressing you nor making you happy. And he would laugh about it. He goes, I love you like a son. He's like, but my job is not to make you happy. Because my job, he goes, I'll make you happy if I build your company and build your personal and company wealth. He goes, that is my job. He goes, so every choice that I suggest we make will be on that tack. And it was nice to have somebody like that. So he came in as a COO, and that was when we really started turning it into more of a business. We had the portfolio, but still we're just a little like, we're really good at what we're good at and not so good at what we weren't, And so bringing on that person that was totally different than me, I think, my strengths and the strengths of our people in our staff were very developed, and they weren't developed elsewhere. And so then we started developing that other side.
And did that require then a bigger team build out?
Of course.
Did you stay kind of removed from that and let him take the reins?
Yeah, I would get in and out of it more. Of course, I wanted to understand the process, but then I also realized that for me, it was better to stay with what I was best in show at instead of trying to become a numbers guy, because I wouldn't be nearly as good as the 2 or 3 good people that I could hire. I'd kind of be in the way, and I'd be leaving off design, marketing, and the feel and the touch points of the business. And so that's where you really have to trust who you have on the team and realize like, okay, like everyone, we have to decentralize power a little bit. And before, that's where I think kind of held us back. Pops and I were so similar that we had double stacked our strengths and double exposed our weaknesses. And so that was the slow growth that we were tough, which is why we lasted 20 years. Mm-hmm. And we wouldn't let go of the rope, is why we lasted 20 years. It wasn't necessarily we were good at business.
Yeah. And I think that's such a good lesson for people as they scale companies, is you have to realize what you're good at and fill the gaps of what you're not. Now, in the early days, obviously you have to do everything. You don't have the luxury of having a COO and a CFO and the marketing person. So you are everything at one point, but as it evolves, you start to learn, hopefully you learn what you're good at, and you have to fill those gaps. And the quicker you can do that, it'll unlock so much potential. And it sounds like maybe that individual was that for you guys.
That was the unlock. That was it. And then he mentored, he immediately, it was really cool because he came in and he's like, I need an assistant immediately. I'm like, what the heck? Like, we didn't even have a guy like you 6 months ago, and we already need an assistant. He's like, yeah, I need to get and I said, we started going through all these resumes. He's like, no, I want someone right out of college, super raw, that I could teach them exactly how I think from day one, instead of someone who's gotten the textbook answer to all this stuff. He's like, I want to have someone I could teach to learn how to think dynamically and solve a problem under any possible circumstance. And, that guy's been here now 11 years with us as well. And so he did exactly that. But I had to learn how to get out of the way and just trust, like, okay, you guys give me information, I go off of what that is, but I'm not going to get into the weeds with the numbers on you. Go, well, but that's what you're paid for. And but then I realized, if I'm doing things, and the old mindset was hunt weakness, find all the things I'm bad at and develop and get better at it. What I found was at a certain stage that I'm paid too much to do things I'm bad at.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm too effective at the things I could be really good at to not do them at a high proportion of the day. And so it's like, okay. And it sounds, and it was hard for me in my gut because I felt like a sissy, right? I feel like, oh, Bert gets to do what he likes to do. It's like, I had to assess, like, am I truly good at, and then you have to look at yourself in the mirror. Am I truly good at this? How can I be better at my strengths? How can I bring, and my mindset is I always try to do, yes, I own the business, but I work for the business. Every second of what I'm doing, am I doing a service to the business that I work for? And if I am, and I feel like, whatever I'm paid is, if I was looking at my performance right now as the owner, would I be happy about what I'm doing right now? Would I fire me, or would I send me home, or would I want to give me a raise at this point? And that's kind of what I try to keep in my own mind. And then that just kind of keeps me driving to find, okay, wow, you're pretty decent at this part. Like maybe this is something only I could do. So I'm double tapping and triple tapping that. While, in my opinion, I'm trying to open up blocks for my sales guys. Like I'm not really in sales anymore, but if I could open up opportunities for them and then just support them, I work for them at that point.
It's such a common trap. What you're describing is like the hard work trap of like something we're naturally good at and it gets positive affirmation from the outside, something like hard work. It's like, I'm a hard worker. And then you just keep hitting that hard work button because you say you have to.
Yes. When
certain people around you, as you get to levels, they're like, hey man,
because I want you to see me working hard.
Maybe you stop working a little harder and focus on these like large scale visionary things. And that's you, when you go through that transition, it's like letting something die. You have you have to
and
say,
the ego inside you says, well, I'm the 60 or 70 hour a week or the like that guy. But what I started to realize, thankfully a couple of my guys told me, they're like, hey, go hunting right now. I go, why? They go, because when you come back, you always have a design that sells a lot. I go, really? And they're like, yeah, we've noticed it. Like then they start like, they go, yeah, all of those when you were out for a day and a half and I'm like, oh, but then that made it okay for me because as a leader, I want to be there for my men. I don't want the shots to be going off and I'm sitting back at the tent, right? I'm like, no, like I want to be there. And they're like, you are there. When you come up with the glute ham roller or the so-and-so, like that helps us. So if that's what it takes to go do it, go do it.
When you learn like you have to regulate your system so well because once again, it's like, well, I'm working hard and I'm burning myself out for the good of the business. And it's like, as your employees, it seems like they said, it's like when you're in a real leadership position, you taking care of yourself so that you're thinking as zoomed out as possible. That's actually what matters. You convincing yourself, and it's typically like an addiction almost of I need to work hard. I need to be online. It actually is having a negative detriment to the business.
You're exactly right. And now I would find it like I'd get super stressed out at 4:45 because I'm like, I didn't get all the stuff I needed to get done today. So you know what? I'm going to work till 7:45 to prove it to me and everyone else here that I'll go there. And then you realize you're getting burnt out, you're getting distracted, you're getting like all this other stuff. But I had to go, hey, I think this might be an ego thing. Or maybe it's a question of, do those around me truly trust me and look up to me as a leader? Or do I have to dig the hole to prove that to them I could dig the hole? It's like, hey man, you're paid too much to dig the hole.
Yeah.
You could do better things than dig the hole. Maybe like plan where we're going to dig the next hole would be a really good.
Where's the next site?
It's hard to pull yourself out of the trenches because I still wrestle with that, and I've gotten a lot better at it. But because you almost feel a little bit arrogant, like 100%. Oh, I'm too good for. One example would be trade shows. Like back in the day, Mal and I went to every trade show. It was just her and I, right? And you set the tent up, you do everything, you drive the truck, whatever. You know what I mean? You offload, you unload, you re-inventory everything when you get back. Eventually there comes a time where you have a crew. And then we were all doing the trade shows together. Tony and I would be shirtless up on the ladder, bolting the rig together 100%. And all that. Well, now there's a time where I show up the day of the trade show or maybe a day into it. And that feels really weird to me. I'm getting my own travel
right now.
I'll get my own hotel room if they're at an Airbnb. You know what I mean? Because I'm rolling in for a day or two and I'm out. And I have a ton of guilt from that because no, I should be.
Do you have a guilt too?
I do. But you have to realize as business owners, okay, my value to the business is not turning wrenches, putting a rig together for an event. I should be back here steering the ship and making sure we're going in the right direction.
Yes.
And you have to just purely put it in that context, because otherwise you feel like, well, I can't be too good for turning a wrench with the boys, right?
I'm getting literally anxiety you talking about.
Yeah. So you know,
Yes.
I can totally relate to that.
Yes.
And I just think for anyone listening, you eventually have to pull yourself out of that, because just the value of your time becomes so valuable, and it's arrogant to even think of that. But if you had to charge an hourly rate to your own company of your value, you'd be billing your company probably like $2,000 an hour, right? So should you be billing? So you know, at $2,000 an hour, should you be turning a wrench, building a booth? No, you shouldn't.
And that's
right?
exactly where I go. I go, okay, if I'm paying me right now, why am I taking the trash out right now? I'll do it. That's no problem. Or I'll run to Lowe's to go get some bolts. I'm like, what am I doing right now? And sometimes you need the mental break of just doing a menial thing, right? But you're exactly right. It's so hard as a person who wants to be there for his men and sweat with them and earn their respect and all that. It's very, very difficult. And unfortunately, I generally go off the feedback of my guys if I'm still in the sweet spot. You know, when they tell me, hey, we're going to get there Sunday, we're going to pre-set up the thing, why don't you fly in Monday night? And I'm like, yeah, but the thing, they're like, we're good. We need you there for the social. We need you there for this. I was like, I'll fly in Monday. Go, spend time with your family.
Yep.
We got this. I'm like, really? You guys got it? They're like, we got this. I'm like, for sure I could. We got it. But I remember doing that with my dad as he got older. I was like, no, Pops, you just show up, come to this, this, and this. We could need you for that. And it was hard for him. And I'm like, oh, is this just the plight of how this works?
When you can build, it's how to build a high performing team then as well, because the individuals that are ready for that next step, you're giving them the opportunity to do that. So you give really loose guidance that's very like, hey, we're trying to achieve this. And then instead we all go through this, instead of you spending 3 hours a week with them going over it. It's like, hey, I trust you.
Exactly.
In 3 weeks, I want to hear what you have on this. And then they come back and then very quickly you recognize either this individual is kind of in a role where they've hit their ceiling, or you get some individuals, which I'm sure you've seen, is that you're like, holy shit, they did this better than I would have if I'd had been involved. And then it's like that person's ready to rise.
And that's where I'm finding it now. You know, we just got done with Summer Strong, our big event, and I'm getting less and less involved. This is our 18th year doing it. I'm less and less involved. And this year specifically was the first year without Pops. Like, it was an emotional kind of thing. And I was just worn out April, May. And I just told the guys, I was like, y'all know what to do. Tell me what I could do to help. I'm going to give you a little bit of guidance, but like, I can't be in this thing the whole time. And it went off without a hitch. It was awesome. Like, I was so proud of everybody. And I was like, talked to Dobby, the guy, one of my right-hand men. And I was like, having a drink with that night. I was like, hey, Oz. And he just looked at me and goes, we all know the drill. Like, we understand the operation. Like, and I was like, yeah, you all do, don't you? Like, even Battlefield during the game, all the little audibles and stuff like that, I don't even have to call those. Like, yeah, we know what we're doing. And I'm like, been at it. This is my 26th year. And it's nice to have a crew of guys and gals that are like, yeah, like, I could step away. You know, I went to Africa for 10 days last year. It was awesome to come back and go, cool.
Everything's still running.
Yeah. Like, really? Y'all good? And you're like, yeah, we're good. Hey, this one came in. This one is, hey, we need to ask you about these 3 things. You're like, really? Okay. This is wild. Like, I don't know how that works.
Well, it's cool you had the humility too to do, because I can imagine, and even not as an owner, but just growing through the levels of an organization, like you said the word, you can build an ego that tells you that you're so important that you need to be involved in things. And as you start to peel that back and realize that's not true, it takes some humility to let that happen. Yeah. Because it actually feels like it's attack on your system. Like, it's attack on the identity you've built. Right.
And your ego, and you're like, but I gotta be, it's like, hold on, like, you guys had that. And then you realize there's some things how they would do, like this past year, the national conference, they did, you know, most of the equipment selection, where we went for the parties, like the whole thing. And it was awesome. And I would go, I'm like, how I wouldn't have done that. And I'll tell them, I'm like, honestly, I wouldn't have done it, but I'm with it. I like what you did there. Like, okay. Like, I see how you saw that. Like, very cool. So but again, that's a team that they understand the overarching goal of the company. They know the feel of the company and the tempo, and like, here's what Sorinex should feel like to the customer. And like, a friend of mine, Luke Day, is a strength coach at University of South Carolina. I thought it was such a brilliant thing. I was talking to him last week. I said, what is your training? How do you train University of South Carolina? Like, what is are you Olympic lifting base, powerlifting base, whatever? And he goes, I only look at when I train a team. He goes, the litmus is, what do I want the opposing team to think of my team at the end of 4 quarters? I'm like, huh. And he goes, I want them to think when they play the University of South Carolina Gamecocks, holy shit, those guys hit really hard and they never stopped. I thought they were going to give up after the first quarter or two because no one could keep hitting that hard. But those guys punched us in the mouth for 4 straight quarters. He goes, that is my goal. Whatever the score says, I don't care. But I want the effect on target to be, I don't want no part of that again. And he goes, so my training modality is whatever brings us to that. And I'm like, what a cool way to look at training.
Yeah, that's awesome. Right? I know that game. You're like,
right?
I've been in games where you're like, shit, I'm ready to be done with this one.
Yeah, you know right. I mean? Yeah, like, hey, the score might be up, but no more of those guys.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, but that's the beauty of it. It's like, yeah, we all want to win, but like all you could really affect is like that effect on target, right? Mm-hmm. And so like kind of looking like, what is the goal for Sorinex? I want more and more people to feel these things when they deal with us. And so if my guys and gals, they know that that's the goal, then great, then I've done my job. And then I search for other ways I could be valuable to the company as that goes. And so it's a weird transition for me because I'm kind of having to like, you know, Pops passed a year ago. So I went from, in my mind, still Pops' helper, although I became president of the company 10 years ago. But now I went from co-owner to owner and a top guy. And just even though I was running it, he was still always there. I never did a big decision without walking in his office out of respect and saying, hey, Pops, thinking about this. In the last couple of years of his life, he goes, I trust you completely. Or he maybe give me a couple, hey, I was thinking this, and we'd go back and forth. But now you're like, hands are fully on this wheel. Like I could kind of do whatever I want, which is a weird thing. And I told Pops years ago, he was like, you need to lead and this and that and the other. And I kind of had a hard conversation. I said, okay, if you truly want me to be a leader, this means I might disagree with you at times and if I'm the president or the top guy, are you good with me vetoing some of your suggestions? And he was still majority owner. He looked at me like I was crazy. And I go, I don't like it either. I was just like, that's why I've done it. I was just like, but you see what we're saying here. If you're truly asking me to do that, I said, that means I might disagree and veto certain things. I said, but I was grown up to be the obedient dog. Like whatever Pop said, you're compliant, you did it. My dad was a intimidating sucker. And so I said, so this is what's bred into me is to listen. I said, so you're asking, it's like coming home and your dog's on the ground. There's like the obedient dog that is perfectly trained. And you're like, you throw him the keys to the house. You're like, hey, what do you need me to do? And the dog's like, what are you talking about? I'm laying here. I'm like, I'm doing my thing. So I said, that was kind of our transition. So it was rough at times because there's his ego, there's my beliefs, there's his beliefs. And so that was probably one of the harder things, like that 5 or 6 year period of just like 2 alpha bulls deciding who's going to relent. You know, and then finally, like I would say my biggest thing I'm proud about in Sorinex. Yes, we've changed the industry. Yes, we've invented things that are, you know, been copied all over the world, whatever. But there's 10, 15 years ago when I was kind of coming on more as a leader, people in our lives are like, man, you and your dad are going to have like the big come to Jesus fight one day. Like it's going to get nuclear. And I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, no, like you're both too similar. You are going to have the big one. And I was just kept thinking that. And I was listening. I'm like, okay, well, I guess if this has to happen. And I decided right then, I was like, no, it doesn't. And because obviously my dad was my dad, he was my biggest coach ever. He was my mentor. He was my best friend. He was my hunting partner. He's my training partner. He's my business partner. He's an only child. So am I. So I said, if he and I break, we're both so in, you know, there's ego, there's pride, there's emotion. I said, if we break, I don't believe that will ever be able to be truly fixed at the emotional level. Yeah, we might talk again, we might go like, but it will never be the same. And I said, in my mind, I said, that will be in effect killing him. And I said, I will not let that happen. So if the business has to grow slower or be hampered because we can't get maybe the hard decisions done faster, I will endure that. So we will be together the entire time. And towards the last few years, we were dialed, and we'd kind of worked through those really, really, really hard times without ever having the nuclear fight. Like there was definitely days that, you know, shit was thrown and, you know, whatever, but there wasn't the, you know? And so, you know, just kind of personally, like when I found him the day that he passed, the first thing that went through my mind was, we won. Like, that's the first thing I thought, because I realized I had 48 years of life. He had 74 years of life. We made the most out of everything. Like you said before, against all odds, mathematically, it wasn't supposed to happen. There wasn't supposed to be a kid from New Jersey who had never been to college to get a full ride to start a company, and a kid that would never been to the state championships and walked onto a team, became a 4-time All-American, made Olympic trials. And these two guys had no business classes, created a brand that was a multi-million-dollar international brand, and we never got in a fight that broke us up until the day we died. We were on the same page. The day he passed away, he was in my office. We were talking about hunting that coming up fall. We were talking about training, and we cleaned up the gym together, and he walked out in the gym and took his last workout and went home and passed away. So I was like, I'll take that as a win.
Absolutely. That's incredible. That's incredible.
So that's what I want people to understand. Like, business is business, man. Money is cool. You can make money, like all that. My goal is never to make enough money so I didn't have to do this anymore. Like a lot of people are like, oh, what's your exit plan? Make enough, you know, hey, you did this thing, you sell it, you never have to do anything anymore. Like, maybe wrongly, my goal is always, how do I make enough money so I get to keep doing this? How do I make it sustainable and profitable enough so we get to keep doing this? Because I think we're doing a good job for the industry. I like it. My friends like it. My customers find us valuable. My employees, we have 202 employees now. Like one of the metrics we go off of is who gets to buy their first house? How many people get to buy their first car? How many of these families have had their first? We have a lot of our employees told me, like, my family lineage has never owned 2 cars, like in a household. It's like me and my wife both have a car now. Like, that's awesome. Like, that's a cool metric. Like, that's how you're changing lives, in my opinion. And so the goal is like, how do we get to continue to do that versus what's the exit strategy? And maybe I'm stupid. Maybe I'm a terrible business person from that regard. I just don't know what else I would do. You know, what I'd like to, my wife one day, she's like, what's the exit strategy? I'm like, 40 hours a week. That's what I want to get to. I want to get to working like a normal person, spending time with the 4 people that I live with, my wife and my 3 kids more, enjoying the fruits of our labors more. But the leaving it's like, I don't even know. Like, it's like, well, are you going to lift weights until you don't have to anymore? What does that even mean? Like it doesn't make sense. So maybe I just look at business differently than a lot of people do.
Well, I think it's because you're actually passionate about what you're doing, right? And I think that's huge. Because yes, it's been a grind and you've busted your ass, but at least it's been doing something that you're genuinely passionate about. So that makes it a little bit easier to endure.
Sure. If that's what you think you're supposed to do, then what are you going to stop?
Because there are people that
right?
their plan from day one is to sell the business, right?
Sure.
And there's competitors in our space where they're 15 years more seasoned than me, and they knew how to raise capital, and they knew, okay, this is our 5-year plan. We're going to do 2 or 3 raises. We're going to do top line revenue, and then we're going to get a multiple, and we're going to sell 100%. I'm fucking out. There are people but
there are days that I go, boy, that would be cool.
Yeah. But to your point, what I can relate to, because people ask me that all the time, are you ever going to eventually sell it? I'm like, I don't know what the hell I would do. You know what I mean? Because
I like it,
and I think it's cool though, because I think that approach that you guys took, because I think you said at the 18-20 year mark, you guys were still just doing it because you're passionate about it, and you really, your dad wasn't even really making any money, and he's making $36,000, you're making $24,000.
Yeah.
But that mindset of you're doing it for the right reasons, I think ultimately is what led you to be to massive success that you had.
Thank you.
You know what I mean? So it's almost counterintuitive, because if you had been more, all right, we got to make a bunch of money and we're doing it for the money, I think it would have been harder to push through those dark moments.
Exactly.
But it was you guys flipped the script. Hey, we're here because we want to make an impact.
Inadvertently.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what I tell people. You have to have so much passion, because the passion will carry you through the dark times when it's not fun anymore. Like if you truly, truly love it, I'm sure buds, I'm sure a lot of different stuff like this ain't fun anymore. This was cool when I wanted to be this dude.
Yep.
Not cool now. Hell Week is not cool now. But you're like, yeah, but I really, really want to do this thing. And I don't see myself doing anything different. So I'm already here. So just keep going. And that's, and maybe it's a super simplistic way to look at it. I don't know. Like I don't fault people. I mean, maybe if I'd have done a business that I wasn't so inextricably tied to, maybe if we were like refrigerator builders, maybe if someone would have offered me a whole bunch of money for it, but like deuces, I'm out.
Yeah.
Like I could totally get that. But right now it just feels like there's too many people that I love with on both sides of the table. I don't know what I would do. Like,
one thing you could do, and I don't know if you, and this would probably be my last area to go into. Have you guys ever raised like outside investment, private equity, or anything like that?
I've thought about it. I've actually had some people very recently. You probably get those emails all the time too.
Yeah, because that's probably what we're going to try to do in the next year or so. Probably sell 30 to 40%. Still maintain complete control. But there's something to be said for extracting value from the business that you spent your life building.
I've toyed with that idea.
And I think there's a way to do it. If you find the right partner, it won't corrupt the business. Now there's horror stories of PE firms that have invested in companies and gotten 51%, and then they lose the ethos of the company and the values because they're just there to make a buck because they're going to sell it again in 5 years. But I think there are partners you can find that say, hey, Bert, we want you to do what you do. You're good at it. We're going to put some gasoline on the fire. We'll provide you some support in these other areas where we're good at. But we, and hey, here's some money for the family.
That has come up in conversation. Just like this, like kind of a loose conversation. You're like, well, that doesn't sound terrible. Like I've had enough cortisol drip for the last 26 years. It'd be maybe nice to not have that. I mean, again, but it's hard because I feel so blessed. My family hasn't missed a meal in a while.
Yeah.
Like one of my old COO used to tell me, he said, I go, what do you think rich is? He's like, rich is when you go to a restaurant and you don't look at the number first, because you read what you want to order and you order it. And I was like, man, it's an interesting way of looking at it,
Yeah. I think I've toyed with this just for kind of a thought experiment. Is like, because if you sell 51% or more, or even sometimes even less than 51%, depending on what the operating agreement says, like, they can actually fire you as the CEO. And I always kind of chuckle to myself, like if we were to sell 70%, which we won't, how long would I last as the CEO until I got fired? You know what I mean? Like, would I last a year? Would I last 20 years? How long would it take till I say something on this? And they're like, oh, that's not allowed anymore. And I'm like, oh, I guess I'm out of job. Like a Chip Wilson story, like Lululemon, where
pushed out.
you're the OG and then you end up getting fired. And then you hear these stories. A lot of times they have to bring the visionary back because it goes astray. But I was, kind of crack up thinking to myself, like, man, how long would I last if a PE firm bought 70%? And because technically you're they want you as the guy, at least initially, but it's, you might miss some earnings and things like that. Or, so
isn't it funny to think? Because I've thought those sort of same things. I used to joke before we had an HR department. I was like, man, if we ever get an HR department, I'll fire myself immediately. Just preemptively. Because
no, we always joke about that because we have Jeannie now. She runs our HR, but we got guys like Bruno and me. We're walking around. We got guns, and it's.
I'm a professional fighter that ran my HR department. It was awesome.
Really? There you go.
He's 5-0 in UFC now. So it was pretty cool. Like, he's an awesome guy, but you're like, he just kind of came up in that, and we're like, listen to Brandon.
Well, this was awesome, man. This
it.
Such a cool story. I mean, there's so many lessons from this, and the humble beginnings and just what it took. I mean, a lot of people can't go 2 years, dedicated to a task that isn't bearing fruit yet. And you guys went well beyond 20 years, and obviously you've built it into a worldwide brand that everyone recognizes. That when I think of Sorinex, I just think that shit's bomb proof.
Well, thank you. That was actually our first motto was bomb proof.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
the next door neighbor or one of our first customers looked at it and he goes, man, he's like, that stuff is just bomb proof. He's like, it's black, it's ugly, but it looks like it's built to last.
Yes.
And so our first 2 taglines were bomb proof and built to last.
Love that.
So, yeah.
Well, maybe I'm spot on. Yeah.
Well, good. It worked out. Yeah. No, I appreciate that. And it's interesting when you put it in terms of the years, and it's kind of like, probably like when you did your military, like you don't think of the amount of years or whatever. You just go, I don't know, it's just what I do. I don't know. I wake up tomorrow and I do it again, and wake up tomorrow and I do it again, and hopefully it gets better, you know. And I don't know. It's I appreciate that, but it's kind of surreal. It's surreal now when you, or for us, like when you see the majority of the NFL or college football or, you know, super famous people like calling, you're like, really, seriously? Like Sylvester Stallone just called like I'm in the gym and they're like, Sylvester Stallone's on the phone. I'm like, is this a joke?
That's awesome.
You know, like stuff like that is like, as a kid growing up in the 80s, like, this is wild. Like all the cool things that I thought would be amazing in life, like they're happening now. And part of me doesn't want that to end because I think it's a riot. It's super fun.
Yeah. And I think it's so important to take time to step back and admire your handiwork. And that's something Mal and I are really bad at, you know, like,
of course,
we've had some milestone moments happen.
Oh, you guys are crushing.
And then like within 30 seconds, like one of us is like problem solving something with the other, you know, and it's like, you don't even, and you go, so wait a second, like, did that just happen?
Yeah. Let's touchdown dance for a minute.
You know what I mean? And we've really honestly never done that. Like, you know, never popped a bottle of champagne or, you know, done the whole, you know, whatever. But I think it's important because, as you know, as an entrepreneur, 95 to 99% of the time, it's not glamorous. You're in the grind, but there are some cool moments, like when you get that Sylvester Stallone call, or the next, you know, NFL team calls you guys and wants to you know, those are the ones that you celebrate. For us, like last Veterans Day, like, you know, we got to go on Fox News and we paid off all these medical bills. Those are the ones I'm like, okay,
exactly.
This is the 1% that like everyone thinks it is all the time.
Yep.
But when it does happen, enjoy it and admire your handiwork.
Time to do it.
And don't always be, you know, all right, what's the next ridgeline we have to get to, right? It's okay to drop your rucksack and crack a beer and admire, you know, what you just walked up before you throw the pack back on.
Because kind of otherwise, why are we doing this?
Exactly.
If we're just doing it for just work and beating ourselves down just to do it, like there's a lot of other things we could go and just get tired. You know, like
exactly
admire that ridge line, and then also realize like that's what your support system, your wife, your kids, your family, your friends, your mom, your dad, all of those people, they want to be on that journey with you, but they want to also enjoy that side with you. And so I'm trying to like remember that part of it as well, and not always be so front sight focused and task oriented, because I'm sure your machine here is much like mine. It'll eat all you'll give it. Like if I could work 100 hours a week, it would eat it, you know? And so then I realized, okay, so I'm never filling the belly of this beast. So I have to protect myself. So I just don't open up a vein into it and then I'm dead. And I've had those times where I am so wrecked. Central nervous system is wrecked. Adrenals are wrecked. And I have to take care of myself. And I know, like Ollie, we've talked about, you know, I think you went through the program over there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Ollie's keeps telling me, he's like, Bert, come up. I was like, I can't leave for a month. And he's like, that's what everyone says, you know? And so I'm trying to now at this stage, take a little bit of time for myself and go, okay, what is it if we build this thing into this juggernaut monster and I give away relationships or my happiness or my central nervous system or adrenals, like if the shading on my world starts darkening of how I see the world because of my success, then I've missed it. I've jumped the shark in some ways. So I'm trying to be more cognizant of that. And I think all of us need to remember that, because we could all get really, really focused with the number, or like you said, the next ridge line, and all these entrepreneurs out here. That's the balance, in my opinion. The balance, that's the success side of that balance. When you start doing it, you get addicted to that success. You get addicted to that number, that growth, that, oh, we are in hyper growth for X number of years, and heaven forbid we're not, you know? And, you know, I want Sorinex to, I think all of us in all of our businesses, there's a lot of really cool stuff in the industry that came before us. at some point, Sorinex won't be a business. I don't know when that is. Tomorrow, 10 years, 100 years from now, I don't know. And there will be a lot of cool, innovative strength stuff that comes after that. At the timeline that we're here, I want to occupy that with top level service and products. And that's all I know I could do in this little time that I'm here on this earth. But I don't want to forget that at some point I won't be relevant anymore.
Yep.
And neither will my company. And to not take it so freaking seriously, it's not a matter of life and death every day. And this isn't why I'm put on this earth. So
well said.
Everyone needs
Love
to
it.
remember that.
Well, a good way to end it. Bert, thanks so much, man.
Thank
awesome hearing the story. And you got an ally here at Born Primitive. I know you're going to be joining Bruno here and get some lunch, and then you can rejock and do it again. But
thank you for everything you guys are doing. Your products are amazing. The people are amazing. And you guys are doing a heck of a job.
Awesome. Well, thanks, man. Hopefully maybe we can work together a little bit in the future. Cool. I think there's some opportunities there. So maybe for another combo.
Yeah.
But
yes, sir.
All right.
It.
This
Thanks,
one's
Bert.
a wrap.
Thank you. Appreciate you.